Imagine for a second that you are tasked with monitoring a massive, destructive wildfire from space. Like, lives are literally on the line.
Yeah, the pressure is immense.
Exactly. Emergency responders on the ground are just desperately waiting for your coordinates to know which way the fire line is moving. And you have access to a billion-dollar piece of orbital hardware.
The best of the best.
Right. So you sit down, you pull up the live feed, and it's just a screen of gray. The satellite is completely blinded by the smoke.
Which is just, it's terrifying.
It really is. You have the most advanced, expensive camera humanity can build, and it is totally defeated by the very disaster you are trying to stop.
So welcome to another deep dive. Today we are looking at a piece of technology that is fundamentally rewriting how we observe the Earth.
Yeah, we are diving into the May 3, 2026 launch of Mission Drishti.
Right.
And this is the world's first OptoSAR satellite. It was developed by this Bengaluru-based deep tech startup called GalaxEye Space, and it is a phenomenal piece of engineering to unpack. Just to give you a full picture of what this means, we've pulled from a really diverse stack of sources today.
We have. We're looking at official launch logs from SpaceX, policy analyses covering India's shifting private space sector, and some really deep technical breakdowns from business publications like Business Standard and Mint.
Plus some fascinating strategic insights from the Indian defense community. And our mission for you today is to basically unpack how a 190-kilogram box of electronics orbiting 500 kilometers above our heads is fixing a glaring flaw in global intelligence.
We're going to explore what this means for disaster response, the military, and, India's booming private space sector.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand why Mission Drishti is such a massive breakthrough, we have to talk about the frustrating blind spot that has plagued satellite imaging for decades.
Right. Historically, anyone relying on satellite data, so think of a farmer checking crop health, or an insurance adjuster verifying flood damage, or even a military general tracking troop movements, they've all been forced into this really bitter compromise.
A compromise between two different types of sensors.
Exactly. You had to choose. On one side, you have electro-optical sensors, or EO.
I see EO mentioned all over the tech breakdowns in our sources, but what does that actually mean in plain English?
So think of EO as a massive, incredibly powerful version of the digital camera inside your smartphone. It's a passive sensor.
Passive meaning what exactly?
Meaning it relies on the sun's natural illumination. It captures the visible and infrared light that's just naturally bouncing off the Earth.
Okay, makes sense.
And when the conditions are perfect, EO sensors are unmatched. They give you beautiful, high-resolution, human-readable images. You can see the color of the foliage, the layout of a city block, literally the paint on a cargo ship.
It's intuitive. Any person can look at an EO image and instantly understand what they are seeing.
Right. But the weakness is right there in the definition. It's passive.
So it needs the sun.
It needs the sun, and it needs a clear line of sight. The moment the sun goes down, an EO sensor is basically useless.
And I imagine weather is a huge problem.
Oh, massive. If a storm rolls in, or heavy fog covers a valley, or, like in your intro, thick smoke from a wildfire blankets a forest, the camera is effectively blind. You cannot see through atmospheric obstructions. You just get a very expensive, high-definition photograph of the top of a cloud.
Which brings us to the other side of the compromise. The sources call this Synthetic Aperture Radar, or SAR.
Yeah, SAR takes a completely different approach. It is an active sensing technology.
Okay, so it doesn't need the sun.
Exactly. Instead of passively waiting for sunlight to bounce off the Earth, a SAR satellite generates its own energy. It actively shoots down microwave pulses and then measures the strength and the time delay of the signals that bounce back to the sensor.
And because it's using microwaves.
Right, microwaves have much longer wavelengths than visible light. So they easily penetrate clouds, rain, fog, smoke, whatever. They don't care if it's high noon or pitch black. SAR gives you a persistent, unblinking imaging capability round the clock.
Okay, so if SAR can see through anything day or night, why wouldn't we just use that all the time? Like, why even bother with optical cameras at all?
Well, the output is the hurdle here. SAR data does not look like a photograph at all. It's monochromatic, and it represents physical properties rather than, visual ones.
Physical properties?
Yeah, it measures things like surface roughness, structural geometry, and dielectric constants.
Wait, let me stop you there. Dielectric constants. What does electricity have to do with taking a picture from space?
It dictates how the radar pulse behaves. A dielectric constant is essentially a measure of how well a material interacts with an electromagnetic field.
Oh, okay, so it reads different materials differently.
Exactly. So The microwave pulse bounces off a metal roof very differently than it bounces off a dry wooden shed, and very differently than it bounces off soil that is saturated with floodwater.
Okay, so the satellite is reading all those bounces, but what does the actual image look like when I pull it up on a screen?
To a non-specialist, a SAR image looks like a highly abstract, grainy, black and white static screen. It looks like noise.
That sounds completely unhelpful for the average
It
person.
is. It takes highly trained analysts months to decode those complex radar signatures, cross-reference the dielectric readings, and turn them into something actionable.
Wow, so it's literally like choosing between a standard digital camera that takes gorgeous photos but only works at noon on a perfectly sunny day, or an ultrasound machine that works in pitch blackness but requires a medical degree to actually understand what you were looking at.
That captures the dilemma perfectly. And for decades, the global market just, accepted that compromise.
But reading through this, I keep wondering if we have optical satellites taking pretty pictures and we have radar satellites seeing through the clouds, why couldn't we just use two different satellites and overlay the images on a computer? Just digitally stack the photo on top of the radar map.
That is the exact workaround that standard competitors in the global market have traditionally attempted. Companies like Planet Labs or ICEY,
So they do try to do that.
they do. They operate separate constellations, one flying optical cameras, one flying radar. But when you try to manually stack those data sets, you run into the harsh laws of physics and orbital geometry.
Because they're on different satellites.
Right. They are flying in different orbits, so they are looking at the Earth from different angles at different times.
Ah, so you get parallax errors. They aren't looking at the building from the exact same vantage point.
Parallax errors, yes, and massive time gaps. An optical satellite might pass over Bengaluru at 10:00 a.m., but the SAR satellite might not pass over that exact same spot until 2:00 p.m.
And if you are trying to track a moving military convoy or monitor a floodway that is actively rising a 4-hour gap, makes overlaying those images completely useless. I mean, the trucks have moved. The water has risen.
Exactly. The data is not inherently aligned. And that specific frustration, the agonizing process of trying to merge separate, flawed data sets, that brings us to the genesis of GalaxEye Space.
And the origin story here in the sources is wild because the founders of GalaxEye didn't even start out building satellites.
No, they didn't.
They are alumni of the Indian Institute of Technology Madras, IIT Madras. And back in 2019, this founding team, Syash Singh, Daniil Chowda, Kishan Thakkar, Rakshit Pat, and Pranit Mehta, they were part of Team Avishkar Hyperloop.
Right. They were building terrestrial high-speed transportation.
Yeah. They were the only Asian finalists in Elon Musk's 2019 SpaceX Hyperloop pod competition, literally building pods to shoot through vacuum tubes. So how do Hyperloop engineers pivot to orbital Earth observation?
Well, the crossover in engineering skills is surprisingly direct. When you are building a Hyperloop pod, you are dealing with a hard vacuum environment.
Oh, like space?
Exactly. You have to manage extreme pressure differentials, intense vibrations, and really complex thermal management systems. Those are the exact same hostile conditions a satellite faces in orbit, so they had the underlying engineering chops.
So the pivot itself happened during a consulting project in the U.S. The team was trying to assess wildfire damage in California. They pulled the optical satellite imagery to see which homes survived, and it was entirely obscured by thick smoke.
The classic EO problem.
Right. So they turned to the SAR imagery to see through the smoke, but the data was so abstract and unintuitive that it would take specialized analysts weeks to decode it.
Which is entirely useless during an active crisis.
Exactly. So they realized no one in the market had the hardware they needed. If they wanted instant, clear images through smoke, they had to build a completely new type of satellite themselves.
Which leads to the core innovation of Mission Drishti. They develop a proprietary hybrid configuration known as OptoSAR.
So what does that actually look like?
Well, instead of flying two different satellites, they placed an X-band SAR sensor and a 7-band of multispectral imager onto a single, thermally stable optical bench inside one 190-kilogram satellite.
Okay, there is a lot of Bent's terminology there. Let's break that down for the listener.
Right.
What is an X-band sensor and why 7 bands for the optical camera?
Sure. So X-band refers to a specific frequency range of microwaves. It operates at a very short wavelength, about 3 centimeters.
And short wavelengths are good for
Detail. Because the wavelength is short, it provides incredibly high-resolution imagery of physical structures, making it ideal for detecting small objects like vehicles or tracking subtle changes in surface texture.
Okay, got it. And the 7-band optical camera.
The 7-band multispectral imager means the optical camera isn't just capturing the red, green, and blue visible light that our eyes see. It is capturing 4 additional wavelengths of light, including infrared.
So it's seeing things we literally can't.
Exactly. It reveals chemical and biological data that is totally invisible to the human eye.
And the sources emphasize that these two sensors are bolted to a quote-unquote thermally stable optical bench. Why is the thermal stability of the bench such a big deal?
Because space is an environment of wild temperature extremes. When the satellite is in direct sunlight, temperatures can soar to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. But when it passes into the Earth's shadow, it plummets to negative 250 degrees.
Oh, wow. A 500-degree swing?
Yeah, and standard metals expand and contract dramatically under those swings. If you bolt a camera and a radar to a regular piece of metal, the metal warps. One sensor gets pointed slightly left, the other gets pointed slightly right, and suddenly your data is misaligned again.
So they engineered a base that just refuses to expand or shrink, no matter the temperature.
Right, ensuring the two sensors remain perfectly parallel. What's fascinating here is that GalaxEye calls this concept sync fusion.
Sync fusion, okay.
Because these two vastly different sensors are co-located on that stable bench and electronically synchronized, they capture data from the exact same spatial coordinates at the exact same temporal instance.
So 0 time gaps.
0 time gaps, 0 parallax errors. The optical payload provides intuitive visual clarity, and the radar provides structural, all-weather certainty.
But, getting the sensors to look at the same spot at the same time is only half the battle. Once you capture that massive amount of data, you have to process it. And the way Mission Drishti handles data seems completely different from older satellites.
It really is. It represents a major leap in orbital computing. Let's establish the parameters first. Mission Drishti operates in a sun-synchronous low Earth orbit at an altitude of about 500 kilometers.
Wait, a sun-synchronous orbit, that means it passes over a given location at the same local solar time every time, right? So the shadows and lighting are consistent.
Exactly. That makes comparing an image from Tuesday to an image from next month much easier.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it revisits the same spot every 4 days, offering a fused spatial resolution of 1.8 meters.
Okay, let's visualize 1.8 meter resolution for a second. What am I actually seeing on the screen? I assume I'm not reading a license plate.
No, you definitely aren't reading license plates. A 1.8 meter resolution means a single pixel in the image represents a 1.8 by 1.8 meters square on the ground.
So it's more for the big picture.
Yeah, at that scale, you can clearly identify the footprint of buildings, the layout of roads, and the presence of large vehicles like shipping trucks or military armor.
Yeah.
You're mapping infrastructure and movement.
Got it.
But the real magic of Drishti isn't just the sensors of the resolution, it's the computer inside the box. You see, traditionally, satellites are just dumb pipes.
Meaning they basically just act like a remote hard drive in space.
They act as simple data conduits. They take pictures and then transmit those massive, heavy raw files down to ground stations on Earth. And then terrestrial server farms do the actual processing.
Which has to create a massive bottleneck.
A huge bottleneck and very high latency.
So traditionally, satellites are just snapping these giant photos and trying to upload those massive raw files over a terrible connection to Earth. But Drishti is doing edge computing in space. It's like having a high-end gaming PC right there on the camera, editing and compressing the video before it ever sends it down.
That's a great way to look at it. Drishti is equipped with an onboard NVIDIA Jetson Orin platform.
Wait, they put a whole AI computing platform in space?
They did. It's performing subpixel co-registration, jitter correction, and data fusion right there in orbit.
Okay, jitter correction. I know satellites vibrate, but what is the computer actually doing up there to fix that?
Well, the satellite is moving at roughly 17,000 miles per hour, while internal reaction wheels are spinning to keep it pointed at the Earth. That creates micro-vibrations or jitters.
And if you are taking a highly magnified picture from 500 kilometers away, a tiny vibration totally ruins the image.
Exactly. So the onboard computer is actively calculating those micro-movements and algorithmically correcting the blur in real time. It takes the raw data from both the radar and the optical sensors, cleans it, and weaves it together before beaming the final polished file down to Earth.
Okay, I actually have to push back here for a second, because one detail in the technical breakdown made me pause.
What was that?
The sources mentioned that when thick clouds block the optical sensor, the onboard AI, quote-unquote, regenerates the visual layer. Now, I mean, we all know about generative AI down here on Earth making up facts. Is the satellite just hallucinating an image of what it thinks is under the clouds? Because how could a military general or a disaster relief coordinator possibly trust an AI's guess?
That is a very fair concern, but it is crucial to understand the distinction here. The AI is not guessing or hallucinating an image from scratch.
It's not.
No, it is using the radar backscatter as a physical, factual foundation. Remember, the SAR sensor is actively bouncing microwaves off the physical objects on the ground in real time.
Right, the dielectric constants.
Exactly. The AI onboard has been explicitly trained to translate those specific radar signatures, the exact dielectric constants and surface roughness it is reading right that second, into an intuitive optical-like visual output.
Oh, I see. So it's looking at the radar and saying, this specific bounce pattern is definitively a metal vehicle, and this pattern is definitively flooded soil, and it basically colors it in so a human can understand it instantly, rather than making the human read a spreadsheet of numbers.
Precisely. It is a highly calibrated translation, not a hallucination. The sync-fused data product delivers up to 3 times more information than a standalone sensor. It makes the data analysis ready the very second it hits the ground station.
And when you have data that is instantly usable, regardless of the weather, the applications shift from long-term scientific studies to immediate life-saving operations. Let's look at how this impacts the world. Tropical monsoons are a massive use case in the sources.
They are. In tropical countries like India, the monsoon season brings vital rain, but also catastrophic floods, cyclones, and landslides.
And it brings heavy, persistent cloud cover that can last for weeks.
Exactly when emergency responders need eyes in the sky the most, standard optical satellites are completely blind. But Drishti pieces, right through the storm.
It can tell disaster management agencies exactly which villages are underwater and which supply roads are washed out in real time, while the storm is actually still raging.
The economic implications are equally profound, especially for agriculture and insurance. We mentioned earlier that the multispectral imager has 7 bands. Some of those are specialized bands, like Coastal Blue and the Red Edge band.
Yeah, I saw Red Edge in the notes, and it said agricultural insurance companies care deeply about it. I was so confused. What does a specific color band have to do with crop insurance?
The Red Edge band measures a very specific wavelength of light located between the visible red and the near-infrared spectrum.
Okay, and why does that matter?
Because healthy plants with high chlorophyll content reflect this light very strongly. Stressed or dying plants do not. By monitoring the red edge, you can measure crop health and yield potential with incredible precision.
But normally, if an agricultural region is clouded over for weeks, you lose all that data.
Right. But with Drishti, the fusion of those optical insights with the SAR train analysis means you can track crop growth even during prolonged cloudy periods.
So think about the aftermath of a natural disaster. Instead of waiting weeks for the clouds to clear or sending human adjusters trekking into hazardous, flooded areas to verify insurance claims, companies can use Drishti's analysis-ready imagery to process payouts for thousands of farmers immediately.
It radically reduces the economic recovery time for rural communities.
And that persistent, all-weather reliability brings us to the strategic and defense capabilities. Because Mission Drishti is fundamentally a dual-use platform.
It is. Historically, India has faced significant vulnerabilities when monitoring its borders during the monsoon season.
The sources bring up an example called Operation Sindoor. What actually happened there?
During certain historical operations, the Indian military found their indigenous optical satellites blinded by seasonal cloud cover.
So they couldn't see their own borders.
No, they were forced to rely on commercial imagery purchased from foreign providers just to see what was happening. That involves delays, it involves exorbitant costs, and it involves potential data sharing restrictions.
Yeah, you really don't want to be asking a foreign corporation for permission to look at your own borders during a national security crisis.
Mission Drishti provides sovereign, indigenous, all-weather intelligence. For border surveillance, the X-band SAR can penetrate camouflage netting and detect metallic objects like hidden artillery or tunneling equipment through clouds or smoke along highly sensitive areas like the line of actual control or the line of control.
It also completely transforms maritime domain awareness. The sources talk about how it can track maritime traffic and spot dark vessels.
Dark vessels.
Yeah, these are ships that illegally turn off their transponders to avoid detection, usually for illegal fishing or smuggling. Drishti doesn't care if a transponder is off, and it doesn't care if there's a huge storm over the Indian Ocean. The radar will physically spot the ship.
which completely explains why the launch of a relatively small 190-kilogram satellite has garnered such intense attention at the highest levels of government.
Right. And we should note for you, the listener, that we are looking at this strictly from an impartial analytical perspective. We aren't taking any political sides here. We're just impartially sharing what's in our source material today.
Of course.
But the political reception detailed in our sources is very telling. This launch was universally praised across the Indian political spectrum. Prime Minister Narendra Modi publicly hailed it as a major achievement. We also saw statements from Home Minister Amit Shah and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh highlighting its strategic importance.
Regardless of your political leanings, when you see that level of unified institutional support for a private startup, it underscores just how immense the strategic value of this technology really is.
It really does.
It also serves as a massive validation of a profound policy shift in India. Because a private startup building the nation's largest private Earth observation satellite and launching it on an American SpaceX rocket, that would not have been possible just a few years ago.
Right. It required a fundamental rewiring of the nation's space policy, because historically, space in India was a strict government monopoly run by the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO. Private companies were basically just parts suppliers.
But the structural reforms initiated in 2020, which culminated in the Indian Space Policy of 2023, completely changed the ecosystem. ISRO transitioned from being a monopoly service provider to acting as a facilitator for private industry.
And the government established InSpace, the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, to act as a dedicated regulator.
And InSpace didn't just hand GalaxEye a permit to launch, they provided access to ISRO's own highly restricted high-tech infrastructure for satellite testing. Under the Liability Convention of 1972, India remains the official launching state, legally, even though GalaxEye bought a ticket on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
So the government is legally standing behind this private startup on the global stage.
That government backing gave investors the confidence to act. GalaxEye raised roughly $18.8 million across multiple rounds.
And it is notable who is investing too. You have deep tech venture capital, but you also have corporate giants like Infosys and IdeaForge, which is India's leader in drone technology.
They clearly see the strategic synergy of fusing aerial drone data with orbital SAR data.
So they secured a ride on the SpaceX CS-502 rideshare mission, lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. They share the rocket with 44 other payloads, including satellites from the very competitors they're trying to disrupt, like Planet Labs and ICY.
But GalaxEye brings that unique two-in-one value proposition to the table. Planet Labs gives you daily optical photos, but goes blind in the clouds. ICY gives you amazing radar, but it's incredibly hard to decode. GalaxEye does both, simultaneously, on one thermally stable bench.
And this first satellite is just the foundation, right? The roadmap mapped out in the sources points to a much grander vision. GalaxEye plans to expand this into a constellation of 10 OptoSAR satellites by the year 2030.
With even better technology, pushing the resolution from 1.8 meters down to 0.5 meters.
Rivaling the most advanced commercial imaging platforms on Earth.
But the real goal of a 10-satellite constellation is achieving what they call persistent intelligence.
Persistent intelligence.
Yeah, a single satellite means a 4-day wait before it flies over the exact same spot again. 10 satellites mean near-daily or even sub-daily monitoring of literally any location on the globe.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you? If we step back and look at the big picture, we are watching Earth observation shift from a delayed, weather-dependent, highly specialized luxury into a persistent, intuitive, always-on utility.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
It is. Just like GPS went from a classified military secret to a utility powering the maps on your phone, OptoSAR is democratizing our ability to see the Earth in real time. It means we no longer have to wait for the smoke to clear or the clouds to part to understand what is happening on the ground. The data is just there. It is reliable, it is intuitive, and it is immediate.
It's an incredible leap forward.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn it over for a final thought on what this 2030 vision actually entails.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the broader implications. GalaxEye's goal of persistent intelligence. By 2030, a network of 10 satellites capable of sub-daily, completely unblockable monitoring of any location on the globe is an incredibly powerful capability. But think about the implications of that power.
Right, the privacy aspect.
Exactly. If commercial satellites can soon provide intuitive, high-resolution video-like tracking of any place on Earth, regardless of whether it is hidden by clouds or smoke or the pitch black of night?
How will society balance that?
That's a scary thought. How do we balance the undeniable, life-saving benefits for disaster response and agriculture with the profound everyday implications for global privacy? When the sky literally never blinks and nothing can hide, what happens to the concept of being unobserved? It is a question that all of us will have to answer very soon.
Because the smoke is clearing, whether we are ready for it or not. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.